Welcome, friend. In a world that often feels like a relentless barrage of demands and frustrations, finding true inner peace can seem like an elusive dream. The constant noise, the endless notifications, the inevitable encounters that leave us feeling agitated and on edge, they can all contribute to a simmering undercurrent of anger that subtly erodes our joy and well-being. But what if I told you there's a path, a timeless wisdom that can guide you towards a life where anger, no longer holds sway, a way to navigate the complexities of modern life with a sense of unwavering calm and inner strength? In this next hour, we'll delve into profound principles that, if embraced, can fundamentally shift your relationship with anger, leading you towards a state of lasting tranquility. Prepare to embark on a journey of self-discovery, a gentle exploration of your inner landscape, and the cultivation of a stillness that will empower you to remain unperturbed, no matter the storms around you. Take a deep breath, settle in, and open your mind to the possibility. You will never be truly consumed by anger again after listening to this. Have you ever felt that unwelcome heat rising within you, that tightening in your chest, the thoughts that spiral into a storm? Anger. It arrives uninvited, often unwelcome, and leaves behind a trail of disruption, not just in our external world, but within the very landscape of our being. Why is it that this powerful emotion, so universally experienced, so often leaves us feeling drained, regretful, and further from the peace we seek? Picture a busy marketplace centuries ago. A merchant, rushing to secure the best goods, is suddenly jostled by another, sending his carefully stacked wares tumbling to the ground. In that moment, the instinct to lash out, to blame, to feel the surge of injustice would have been as potent then as it is for us today, when a careless driver cuts us off in traffic, or a colleague takes credit for our work. We see ourselves in that ancient merchant, don't we? The trigger might be different. A delayed train, a harsh word, a perceived slight on social media. But the internal reaction, the quickening pulse and the sharp thoughts, echoes through time. Consider the aftermath of anger. The harsh words spoken that can't be unsaid. The relationships strained. The sleepless nights replaying the scenario, fueling the very emotion we wish to escape. Is this truly the power we want to give to external events and the actions of others? Anger often feels like a display of strength, a way to assert ourselves. But is it not, in reality, a yielding of control? We become puppets to our impulses, our inner peace dictated by the external world. We believe we are protecting ourselves, but are we not instead building walls around our hearts, isolating ourselves in a fortress of resentment? Marcus Aurelius wisely noted in Meditations, how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it. Think about this for a moment. The initial trigger, the spilled goods, the cutting remark, these are often fleeting. But the corrosive effects of the anger that follows can linger for hours, days, even years, poisoning our thoughts and actions. We hold on to the bitterness, replaying the offense, allowing it to dictate our present moment. The first step towards never being truly consumed by anger again is recognizing its true cost. It's not about suppressing our feelings, but about understanding their origin and their impact. We must begin to see anger not as a righteous response, but as a potentially destructive force that ultimately harms us more than anyone else. The power lies in observing the rising tide of anger within us with mindful awareness, recognizing it as a signal, not a command. If anger is an uninvited guest, what are the doorways through which it enters our minds? In the next chapter, we'll explore the common breeding grounds of this turbulent emotion. Chapter 2. The fertile ground of frustration. What are the seeds from which the bitter fruit of anger grows? Often it's not the grand injustices that ignite our fiercest rage, but the accumulation of smaller frustrations, the unmet expectations, the feeling that life isn't unfolding according to our carefully laid plans. Have you ever felt that slow burn of irritation build with each minor inconvenience, until a seemingly insignificant event finally tips you over the edge? Imagine trying to assemble a piece of furniture. The instructions are unclear, the parts don't quite fit, and after an hour of struggling, a crucial piece snaps. That sudden surge of frustration, the urge to throw the whole thing across the room, that's a microcosm of how anger often manifests. It's the pressure cooker of our daily lives, where little annoyances accumulate until the lid blows off. Think of the countless times we've felt this: the slow internet, the endless bureaucracy, the friend who's consistently late. These small frustrations, if left unchecked, create fertile ground for anger to take root. Why do these seemingly minor inconveniences have such a powerful effect? Perhaps it's because they chip away at our sense of control. We strive for order and predictability in our lives, and when these are disrupted, even in small ways, it can feel like a personal affront. We become attached to our expectations, the way things should be, and when reality deviates, we experience a sense of violation. This feeling of being thwarted, of our will being resisted, can quickly escalate into resentment and then full-blown anger. We lose sight of the bigger picture, focusing instead on the immediate annoyance, allowing it to cloud our judgment and steal our peace. Epictetus, in his Enchiridion, reminds us, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. This is a profound insight. The broken furniture, the slow internet, these are external events. Our anger arises not from the event itself, but from our interpretation of it. We judge it as unfair, as a personal attack, as something that shouldn't be happening. By shifting our focus from the external event to our internal judgment, we begin to reclaim our power. To avoid the trap of accumulated frustration leading to anger, we need to cultivate a greater tolerance for imperfection and a more flexible approach to life. This doesn't mean accepting mistreatment or injustice, but rather recognizing that many daily annoyances are simply part of the human experience. We can practice pausing before reacting to these frustrations, questioning our initial judgment, and choosing a more measured response. Cultivating patience and a sense of humor can be powerful antidotes to the simmering resentment that fuels anger. But how do we begin to dismantle these ingrained patterns of judgment? The next chapter will delve into the power of perspective and how shifting our viewpoint can fundamentally alter our emotional landscape. Chapter 3: The Art of Shifting Perspective. Have you ever considered that the same event can be a source of immense frustration for one person and a minor inconvenience for another? What accounts for this difference? Often it's the lens through which we view the situation, our perspective. How can we learn to consciously shift our perspective and see the world and its inevitable challenges in a way that fosters understanding rather than anger? Imagine two people waiting in a long line at the grocery store. One fumes with impatience, muttering about wasted time and inefficient service, their blood pressure rising with each passing minute. The other observes the scene with a sense of detached curiosity, perhaps noticing the interactions between other shoppers, using the time to mentally plan their evening, or simply practicing being present. The external situation is the same, but their internal experience is vastly different, all because of their chosen perspective. Our perspective acts as a filter, shaping how we interpret events, and therefore how we react emotionally. When we are locked into a rigid viewpoint, convinced that things must be a certain way, we set ourselves up for disappointment and anger when reality inevitably deviates. Shifting perspective involves cultivating empathy, trying to see the situation from the other person's point of view. Perhaps the slow cashier is new and nervous. Perhaps the driver who cut us off is rushing to a family emergency. While these explanations may not excuse the behavior, they can soften our judgment and lessen the intensity of our anger. Seneca, in his letters, often emphasized the importance of considering the broader context. He wrote, "Consider how much more pain the consequences of your anger have caused you than the things that triggered it." By stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, we can often see that the immediate offense is relatively minor in the grand scheme of things. Will this matter tomorrow, next week, a year from now? This broader perspective helps to deflate the perceived importance of the triggering event. Cultivating a flexible perspective is a conscious practice. It involves actively challenging our initial judgments and seeking alternative interpretations. We can ask ourselves, is there another way to look at this? What might be the other person's motivations? Will this truly impact my long-term well-being? By consciously choosing to see situations through a lens of understanding and acceptance, we can significantly reduce the frequency and intensity of our anger. But understanding the power of perspective is one thing. Applying it in the heat of the moment is another. The next chapter will explore practical techniques for managing anger as it arises. Chapter 4. The Pause. Before the Storm. In the face of a sudden provocation, that instant when our blood begins to boil, lies a crucial space, a tiny window of opportunity. What if we could learn to insert a pause in that moment, a brief gap between the trigger and our reaction? Could this simple act be the key to weathering the storm of anger without being swept away? Think of a time you reacted impulsively in anger, only to regret it later. Perhaps it was a sharp retort in an argument, an email sent in haste, or a slammed door. In those moments, we were operating on pure emotion, without the filter of conscious thought. Now, imagine a different scenario. The same provocation occurs, but this time, you consciously choose to take a breath, to count to 3, to simply observe the rising emotion without immediately acting on it. This small pause can create a world of difference. This deliberate pause is not about suppressing our feelings, but about creating space for reason to intervene. Anger is often a rapid, instinctive response rooted in our primal fight-or-flight mechanism. By pausing, we disrupt this automatic response, allowing our prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, to catch up. In this brief space, we can ask ourselves, is my initial reaction proportional to the situation? What is the wisest course of action? What are the potential consequences of acting on this anger? This conscious reflection can prevent us from saying or doing things we will later regret. Epictetus wisely advised, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This speaks to the importance of aligning our actions with our values and our desired state of being. If we aspire to be calm and rational, then our immediate reaction of anger is often a betrayal of that aspiration. The pause allows us to reconnect with our values and choose a response that is more in line with who we want to be. Cultivating the pause requires practice and self-awareness. We need to become attuned to the early warning signs of anger. The quickening heartbeat, the clenched jaw, the racing thoughts. When we recognize these signs, we can consciously employ techniques to create that crucial space. This might involve taking a deep breath, stepping away from the situation momentarily, or silently repeating a calming phrase. The key is to make this pause a habitual response, a buffer between the trigger and our reaction. But what do we do during that pause? How can we use that brief moment to actively disarm the rising anger? The next chapter will explore practical strategies for managing anger in the moment. Chapter 5. The Gentle Art of Emotional Detachment. Have you ever noticed how easily anger can cling to us? How we can replay an offense in our minds for hours, even days? What if we could learn to loosen its grip, to create a sense of emotional detachment from the things that trigger us? Is it possible to observe our anger without being consumed by it, like watching a storm from a safe distance? Imagine someone criticizing your work. Your immediate reaction might be defensiveness, hurt, and anger. You might dwell on their words, replaying them in your mind, feeling your resentment grow. Now, consider approaching this differently. Imagine observing your emotional response as if it were a separate entity, a wave rising and falling. You acknowledge its presence without identifying with it completely. You recognize that their words are just that, words, and their opinion is just that, an opinion. This is the essence of emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is not about suppressing or denying our feelings. It's about creating a healthy distance between our thoughts, our emotions, and our reactions. It's about recognizing that our feelings are temporary and do not define us. When we are emotionally attached to a particular outcome or the approval of others, we become vulnerable to anger when those expectations are not met. By cultivating detachment, we lessen the power that external events and other people's actions have over our inner state. We learn to observe our anger with curiosity rather than judgment, recognizing it as a natural human emotion that doesn't need to control our behavior. Marcus Aurelius wisely stated, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This powerful reminder underscores the core principle of Stoicism. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control our reactions. Emotional detachment is a key tool in exercising this control over our minds. By recognizing that our anger stems from our interpretation of events rather than the events themselves, we reclaim our agency. Cultivating emotional detachment is a gradual process. It involves practicing mindfulness, observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment. When anger arises, we can try to label the emotion. This is anger, acknowledge its physical sensations, and remind ourselves that this feeling is temporary. We can also practice mentally rehearsing challenging situations and deciding in advance how we want to respond, rather than being swept away by the heat of the moment. The goal is not to become emotionless, but to become less reactive, to choose our responses rather than being dictated by our emotions. But even with the ability to pause and detach, how do we truly uproot the underlying beliefs and expectations that fuel our anger? The next chapter will explore the process of examining our judgments. Chapter 6. The Examination of Judgments. If our anger stems not from events themselves but from our judgments about them, as the Stoics suggest, then the key to lasting change lies in examining these judgments. Have you ever stopped to question the validity of your angry thoughts? What if the stories we tell ourselves about why we are angry are not entirely accurate or helpful? Imagine a friend canceling plans at the last minute. Your immediate thought might be, "They don't respect my time," or "They always do this." This judgment fuels your anger and leads to a frustrated reaction. But what if you pause to examine this judgment? Could there be other reasons for their cancellation? Perhaps a genuine emergency or unforeseen circumstances. By questioning our initial interpretation, we open ourselves to a more nuanced understanding of the situation and lessen the intensity of our anger. Our judgments are often based on our past experiences, our ingrained beliefs, and our personal biases. We tend to interpret events through these filters, which can lead to distorted perceptions and exaggerated emotional responses. Anger often arises when we feel that our expectations have been violated, that we have been wronged, or that the world is not behaving as it should. By consciously examining these underlying assumptions, we can begin to dismantle the faulty logic that fuels our anger. We can ask ourselves, is this judgment based on facts or assumptions? Is there another way to interpret this situation? Is holding on to this anger serving me? Seneca urged us to, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." This reminds us that change is a constant in life, and our rigid adherence to how things should be often leads to frustration and anger when reality deviates. By accepting the impermanence of things and letting go of our fixed expectations, we can lessen the sting of disappointment and reduce the likelihood of angry reactions. The practice of examining our judgments involves cultivating a more rational and objective perspective. When anger arises, we can try to identify the underlying thought or belief that is fueling it. We can then challenge the validity of that thought by seeking evidence for and against it. We can also try reframing the situation in a more neutral or even positive light. This process of cognitive restructuring can help us to break free from the cycle of angry reactions and cultivate a more peaceful inner state. But this journey towards a life less governed by anger is not just about managing our internal responses. It also involves how we interact with the external world and the inevitable frustrations it presents. The next chapter will explore the importance of acceptance. Chapter 7. The Power of Acceptance. How much energy do we waste fighting against the inevitable, railing against the things we cannot change? What if we could learn to embrace reality as it is, to find peace in acceptance? Could this radical act of acceptance be the ultimate antidote to the persistent sting of anger? Imagine being stuck in traffic. You can honk your horn, fume with frustration, and let your anger consume you, making the experience even more unpleasant. Or you can accept the reality of the situation, that you are in traffic and cannot magically escape it, and choose to use the time productively by listening to a podcast, practicing mindfulness, or simply allowing yourself a moment of stillness. The external circumstance is the same, but your internal experience is vastly different because of your choice to accept rather than resist. Acceptance is not about resignation or apathy. It's about acknowledging reality without judgment. It's recognizing that some things are simply beyond our control, and expending emotional energy fighting against them is futile and ultimately self-defeating. Anger often arises from our resistance to what is, the rude comment, the unexpected setback, the imperfections of others. By practicing acceptance, we free ourselves from this internal struggle, allowing us to focus our energy on what we can influence, our own thoughts and actions. We begin to understand that the world will not always conform to our desires, and finding peace lies not in demanding a different reality, but in making peace with the one that exists. Epictetus offered this profound wisdom. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. This isn't about passively accepting injustice, but about recognizing the difference between what we can control, our responses, and what we cannot, external events. By aligning our desires with reality, we eliminate a major source of frustration and anger. Cultivating acceptance is a practice that requires humility and a willingness to let go of our need for control. It involves acknowledging our feelings without letting them dictate our actions. When faced with a frustrating situation, we can ask ourselves, is this something I can change? If the answer is no, then resistance is futile and only breeds anger. Acceptance allows us to conserve our emotional energy and focus on finding constructive ways to navigate the situation or simply let it be. As we integrate these principles into our lives, we begin to cultivate a deeper sense of inner peace. But the journey doesn't end with managing individual moments of anger. It extends to nurturing a more resilient and tranquil inner state. Chapter 8. Cultivating Inner Stillness. Beyond managing individual outbursts, what does it truly mean to live a life where anger has lost its power? It's about cultivating a deep and abiding inner stillness, a reservoir of calm that remains untouched by the external storms. How can we nurture this inner sanctuary and make it our default state of being? Think of a deep lake on a windless day. Its surface is perfectly still, reflecting the sky with clarity. Now imagine a gust of wind ruffles the surface, creating temporary waves. Our minds are often like this lake, easily disturbed by the winds of external events and internal thoughts. Cultivating inner stillness is like allowing the surface of the lake to settle again, returning to its natural state of calm and clarity, even after the winds have passed. Inner stillness is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to observe our emotions without being carried away by them. It's about creating a space within ourselves where we can witness the ebb and flow of our feelings with equanimity. This stillness allows us to respond to challenges with wisdom and clarity, rather than reacting impulsively from a place of anger or fear. It's about finding a sense of peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, but arises from within. Marcus Aurelius wisely advised, "Return to your own quiet center, and from that place send forth the essence of your being." This highlights the importance of regularly connecting with our inner selves, finding that quiet space within where peace resides. It's through this connection that we strengthen our resilience and our ability to remain unperturbed by external turmoil. Cultivating inner stillness is an ongoing practice. It can be nurtured through mindfulness meditation, spending time in nature, engaging in activities that bring us joy and focus, and consciously choosing to disengage from sources of unnecessary stress and agitation. It's about creating moments of quiet reflection in our daily lives, allowing ourselves to simply be present without judgment. The more we cultivate this inner stillness, the less power anger will have over us. And so, friend, we reach the end of our time together. I hope this journey into the wisdom of managing anger has resonated with you, offering not just theoretical understanding, but practical pathways towards a more peaceful existence. Remember, the transformation we've discussed is not an overnight event, but a gradual unfolding, a conscious choice you make in each moment. Be patient with yourself, practice these principles with intention, and observe the subtle yet profound shifts in your inner landscape. The power to remain unangered, to navigate life's inevitable challenges with grace and equanimity, lies within you. Embrace the stillness, cultivate your inner strength, and step forward into a future where anger no longer dictates your peace. Thank you for listening. May your journey be filled with increasing clarity, unwavering calm, and a deep sense of inner peace.